Greetings all. Well, as you all know, I will get about talking on all sorts of different subjects at times. Mostly it's about plants or Hawaii or something, but then again, you've all been forewarned that I might just talk about guitars. Well, gonna have to do it because one of my guitar gods has died. Jeff Beck has passed away suddenly too. It was no warning. It was a rapid onset of meningitis. I don't know much more about it than that, but yeah, he had been doing pretty good for a guy who was 78 years old. I've listened to Jeff Beck since well back in the 1960s. It was the Yardbirds. It was an English band. Made the top 40 in the United States, and well, they had "I'm a Man." Okay, well, now that's a song was probably originally written by Willie Dixon. Muddy Waters made it famous, really, as a blues tune. He usually referred to it as Mannish Boy, but it does have two titles. The Yardbirds, an English band, they went ahead and they picked that song up, and that was the place I first heard it. I did not hear Muddy do it the first time. It was only later. They were definitely a solid English rock blues band, but they were also at the beginning of psychedelia. Yeah, they had some definite psychedelic overtones. Jeff Beck was right there in the band. See, I didn't even know that I was listening to Jeff Beck at the time when I was listening to the Yardbirds. Now, the Yardbirds later became Led Zeppelin. Okay, and Beck, he left the band. There's various stories about that. I've heard a lot of different stuff, but anyhow, the singer for the band, he up and electrocuted himself, I believe, and there was some bad luck with the Yardbirds, and I believe Beck had a collapse on the American tour and so on, and so that left Jimmy Page holding the bag for the contract at the studio, and so he organized Led Zeppelin when the Yardbirds fell apart. For a little bit of history there. Beck went off on his own at that time in the late 1960s, probably around 1967 or so. Don't quote me on that, but he started his own band. He did a bunch of work with Rod Stewart. You'll hear Jeff Beck with Rod Stewart, and you'll hear Rod Stewart with Jeff Beck. But Truth was the first solo album, and I remember picking it up off the record rack at J.C. Penney's there, going through the files, and I found this Jeff Beck album. I actually, even though I guess I did know who he was from the Yardbirds, I didn't know who he was, and I just on a guess pulled that out of the rack and put it on my turntable, and boy, did I like that one. Yeah, Beck's Bolero, all this stuff. That was Ain't Superstitious. Womp womp. Don't. I ain't superstitious, but a black cat just crossed my trail. Wow. Wah pedal in there. Yeah, very influential on me as a young man. And the early Beck was something that I was able to actually clone. I could listen to those records, and I could figure out what Jeff was doing, and I could play it. But as time went on, well, he went way beyond so many of us. Most rock guitarists and rock blues guitarists pretty much stick to that genre for the most part. Well, Beck didn't. He grew into rock fusion, the jazz rock fusion thing, and he really expanded as a musician as time went on. And he got to a point with that guitar where there's just no way most of us could ever figure out how or what he was doing. He was not a guitarist that was easy to imitate. Take Eric Clapton, for instance, very famous, very popular guitarist. Now, he originally developed his style listening to B.B. King, Clapton has a style that most of us decent guitarists, we can clone it. Yeah, it's not hard. Clapton's style is not hard. He may have a couple licks here or there that challenging, but by and large, I really feel that any decent guitarist, including myself, can pretty much play Clapton's style. Even Hendrix, who was a god in guitars, even the style of Jimi Hendrix was actually easier to imitate than the style of Jeff Beck. Beck used several different types of guitars over the years, but mostly he used a Fender Stratocaster. It was usually always kind of a cream bone color. That was his signature. And Fender actually did, in the custom shop, have a Jeff Beck model they produced. I saw the guitar a few times. Unfortunately, when I did have an opportunity to look over Fender's custom shop Beck model, I didn't pay enough attention to it, because at a glance, the guitar pretty much looks like a stock Stratocaster, but up here at the nut, Beck had a special nut. I don't know what brand it was or anything else about it, other than it was obvious that the nut was made out of metal instead of plastic or bone, and it had some sort of set screws in it, locking type nut. So there's a locking nut. Now, usually that's paired up with a tremolo that, like a Floyd Rose or something, that's also locking. But because of the way Beck played, I was never able to actually get a look at what the tremolo bridge is on his guitars. I didn't look close enough when I got a chance to see one, face to face. So I don't know what he had down here. I know it was up here, and it had a lot to do with what he could do with that guitar. Because Beck, there's a twang bar on these guitars, the Fender Stratocaster, this. And you'd hear it in the surf music, the surf guys, they wah 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 with the twang bar and so forth. But Beck, he would literally hold this thing constantly, and almost every note had the attack of the twang bar. They all came actually like whack whack whack. At first, when I heard it, I thought he was using some sort of an effects pedal. But then I listened closer and looked harder and realized, well, yes, he does use effects, but that isn't where that sound comes from. That sound is because he is working with the twang bar on the attack of almost every note, most of them. You very seldom see him let go of the twang bar. It's why I can't see what the bridge looks like. His hand's always right there. Yeah, he was a master with that. I don't believe there was ever a guitarist that lived that knew how to use the twang bar on a Fender Stratocaster and their style of music better than Jeff Beck. He was extremely proficient. It was really the signature of his style. That, and he had just a genius way of using of using harmonics on a guitar. Yeah, the guitars will pluck notes that are pure notes above the note. If you will pluck them right, you'll get these certain sounds. It's a high, much higher pitch of the note. They're called harmonics. Well, Beck knew where they were everywhere on the fretboard and how to use them, and worked them right into the style of the way his guitar sounded. So there's constantly these harmonics coming out. It was hard to tell where those notes were coming from. So he's a master of harmonics. He was a master of the twang bar. He grew with music. It was something with Jimi Hendrix I'd always hoped for, that Hendrix would live long enough to evolve, because he had that capability. Well, Beck did live long enough to evolve, and he grew over time. He grew to such an extent that it was pretty much impossible to imitate Jeff Beck. It's a very difficult thing to do. Not that anybody wants to or needs to imitate other people, but there was certainly a lot in Beck's style that the rest of us could benefit from if we could figure out how to use it, Yeah, it's difficult. And he got a chance to play with some really great players. Tal Winifred, the bass player, young lady with the kinky curly hair. Oh, she was good. My goodness. Not exactly Jaco Pastorius, but man, for a young woman, she was so good. She used to play with Beck a lot. Really always sounded good. Two had a great rapport. Oh, yeah. So that gets me thinking about age, 78 years old. Jeff Beck died at 78. And I'm not positive without looking it up, but somewhere in the late 70s, like 77 years old or so, might be the average age, for death of American males, for instance. Well, Beck was English, but, probably similar. I would say that his death at 78 was actually a fairly normal age for white males to die at this time of history. So there was nothing unusual about it. It wasn't a lingering illness. It was a sudden onset, I don't know anything about Beck's history as far as, drugs or alcohol or anything like that at all. I know nothing about it. The fact that I don't know anything about that probably indicates he didn't have much of it, because most of the rest of the guys out there that have those stories, they follow them around. We know them. I never heard much about Beck with that. I heard about emotional illnesses. Yeah, he had a few nervous breakdowns, I guess, in his life. I know he loved American street rods, 3-window, 32 deuce scoops with a 350 Chevy and a quad. He picked that L.A. stuff up when he was working in Los Angeles. He loves the American hot rod culture. I know that about him. I guess you don't drive around in fast, high-powered cars very much, too loaded. 78 years old. That gets me thinking. I naturally figure I'm going to live forever. Of course, I'm invincible. Well, only when I drink tequila, but, we don't usually think about our own demise very much. It's not the most pleasant subject, I guess, but, every time I got to go into my address book and start deleting, friends and relatives who are no longer there. A lot of times I'm like 6 years out. It's George Carlin has a skit about, what's the proper procedure? What's the protocol for deleting your dead friends from your email list, right? I'm kind of slow at it. Should we do it in 2 weeks? Should give them 6 months, Every time I do it, I start thinking about my own mortality. And, of course, Beck, he was a little older than I was. Like I said, I was in high school when I bought his first album. But he ain't that much older. I'll be 72 this year, so Jeff had about 6.5 years on me, and that gets me thinking about my own mortality. I figure I'm going to live to 92, which is still mortal, but I could just as easily pass away at an average age for a human being. I guess so many of my friends are already gone. A lot of people like to know what's coming. An ability to know the future. We've spent a lot of money consulting psychics, things like that. Now, a lot of the psychics these days, well, maybe even weirder because there's like phone psychics. My goodness, we used to have to go up and look them in the eyeball with a crystal ball or something. Now they do it over a smartphone. But yeah, I guess. But they, I don't like psychics. I have my own experiences personally of being able to see around the corner at time, and you just have to accept that stuff. But as far as seeking the help of a psychic, going to look for that sort of information, the sorts of things that you would never know any other way until the time came, when it's usually too late. Think about this one. How would you feel if you knew exactly when you were going to die? Even worse, you knew how. What would that do to the rest of your life? I don't know. I guess it depends on the individual, how you'd cope with that. But, I said most of us have no idea. no idea at all. And that's really to our benefit, because when something like death suddenly slams us like a stop sign in the woods, it's like, okay, hi, oh, it's over, or all right. I've got a lot of time to sit there and think about it, hopefully. Sitting around and thinking about it, if I'm 30 years old, I find I'm going to die at 85, the psychic tells me how it's going to happen. I'm going to spend the rest of my life sitting around waiting for that day. I don't know. Yeah, I don't like psychics. I don't like the information they give you and what it does to you, Many years ago, a friend of mine, his parents were fairly wealthy and would have these parties, where they'd have, they'd bring psychics and things in. And one of the people associated, she was a palm reader, palmistry, which we don't see or hear much of that anymore. But it used to be pretty common in the 20th century, where they'd look at your palm and they'd read the lines in your hand, and like reading a teacup, tell you what your future is going to be, your love life, and whether you're going to be sick or well, and so on, just by looking at the lines in your hand. Well, so I remember, because of this association, I encountered a lady who was a palmistry, did palmistry. There we go. And well, she did my buddy, then she did me. And, it's kind of interesting, too, because some of the things she was, maybe you could just have observed this otherwise, but she did state that there were, say, differences between me and Rick, as we're standing there side by side, in the way our palms read and our lifeline and so on, that there were differences. And the differences, she stated, were accurate, but they may have been apparent too. It's possible. She said that, I liked women, but Rick liked women a lot more than I did. Well, yeah, that was true, and but it might also have been obvious, because the palm reader was a woman. Anyway, she looked at my palm. She immediately whistled. Talk about a bedside manner. Yeah, she says, "Oh my God, you got the longest lifeline of any human being I have ever seen." And she's serious, man. The woman was just like, "Wow." Apparently, the line in my hand that indicates how long you live is massive. There's obstructions in it, that there's places later in life where most people pass away, where I will encounter issues that will be, others would think I'm going to die, but I don't. I live through it, and I continue for a long time afterwards. And I'm hoping that some of the blood clots and heart attacks and things associated are those illnesses she was talking about late in life, because they did happen after I'd already outlived most of my friends. And I'm doing all right now. Even my back is feeling pretty good today. Didn't have to take any Tylenol at all this morning. Yeah, anyway, that's what she told me. And she had to say it too. You will outlive almost everyone you ever knew. I'll tell you, I carried this. I was 18, I think, 17, 18 when she did this, and I've not been able to get it off. I suppose as time goes on, what she said gets a little more real as I watch everybody else around me slowly slipping away, and I'm still here. I got a feeling she was on the level, and I don't necessarily like the looks of it. I have made a point of associating with the younger folks. I've basically been instructed by the universe, make friends with young people or you're going to be all alone. So yeah, I have actually done that. I do know a lot of people who are considerably younger than I am and will most likely outlive me. Finally, somebody's going to outlive me. Yeah, so, but, realizing that Beck, he passed away at, what's a pretty normal age for a guy to die. Gets you thinking. Hang loose, folks.